Hello there. You're listening to Coffee and Culture. We're Play on Talk Radio 1260 and 103.7 FM KTRC, and it streams at santafe.com just after 2 p.m. on Saturdays and then repeated on Sundays. My name is Matthew Chase Daniel, and I am your host every other week. And today I'm talking with Candice Hopkins about a show that she curated, which has traveled around. I think this is the third venue here at Site Santa Fe, which is on view from June 5th through September 7th and of this year. So you should go see it. A lot of interesting stuff. It's being installed now as we speak, and I walked through a little yesterday and a little just now and saw some beautiful, inspiring work. And I was commenting, Candice, to that it's a tricky thing to curate a show of visual art in a museum setting that's talking about performance, which is time-based and not usually represented in flat works on the wall and things like that. Was that tricky kind of thing to?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, the exhibition was first inspired by these historical moments that were all about theater and all about performance, both of them in 1969. And then a question I had was, well, what was the kind of resonances of that moment? How did it become incorporated into Native aesthetic practices? But that to say that, yes, there is a lot of work on the wall, but there's also a lot that is performed. There's a lot that changes over time. There's a lot that I think will be unexpected for folks. And I think that agency of that original moment in 1969 that was so tied to what was then called the self-determination era really is a part of all the work themselves. So there's also sound, song, dance represented in various ways. So I would say that the exhibition looked at this question of self-determination, its relationship to aesthetics.
Yeah. So those two things that occurred in 1969 one is this publication out of the Institute of American Indian Arts by Lloyd Kivanu and
Roland
Meinholz, thank you, about Indian theater.
Yeah.
And I read through it yesterday. And I thought it was interesting in a way. And it was one of the things I found interesting about it is it was like it was marking a point where things were changing in the minds of the people who wrote it. They saw that moment as a pivotal moment. And it changed from depictions of traditional life as performance to artworks and engagement in a different sort of way, and not coming maybe out of traditional ceremony and practices, but not replicating those or something. Is that?
Yeah, no, you're really right. This document that's called Indian Theater and Experiment Progress that came out in the summer of 1969 at IAI, for me was all future-looking. Because what they were saying in the document is they were making the case for what they called New Native Theater. So that was a theater that they described that was going to be by and for Native people. So already you have the sense that this is a kind of Native self-determined movement. But they were also challenging the way that theater had been practiced, performed, and historicized in this land. They said, you know, it's surprising that most theater programs in these lands at that time in 69 were kind of looking to Greek tragedy for its origins. And they said, actually, we have the origins of theater here that go back tens of thousands of years, and it's found in ceremony. It's even found, they said, in the powwow grounds. And they were wondering, like, why this doesn't become an origin for this new Native theater practice. So that's what they were putting forward. And in it, what I thought was fantastic was they said that everything had to be tested on stage. And that it was written entirely through notes because they weren't trying to be scripted. And then the whole second half of the document, in fact, what's dominant in it are all these scripts that they worked on with students. So students were already making scripts. And then in the next couple of years, they would commission kind of really visionary Italian designer Paolo Soleri to make his first significant building. That was the theater for
Right,
IAI.
and that was based a lot. When I was reading the document and they were describing this should be packed earth and the stage should project so the audience wraps around. I was like, oh, this is Paolo Soleri Theaters.
Yeah.
Following that. What year was Paolo Soleri built?
I think it was a couple years later. So they were already searching for the architect at the time, and the architect of record was actually a local. Well, he had to be from New Mexico.
Oh, see.
And so then he's the one who, worked on all the kind of licensing and code and all that kind of thing. But it was Paolo Soleri's design, and Paolo Soleri, I think, was very much looking at this document, but also looking to, Adobe architecture of this place. But it felt like that stage that he created was entirely new.
Yeah.
And, what I wanted to show with this exhibition too was that, the roots of Native performance are really contemporary and also very avant-garde, right? As well as looking at things like ceremony too. So that was what was really exciting to me.
Yeah. I saw shows at the Palace Soleri when I first came here. Yeah. Maybe Leonard Cohen, David Byrne, Katie Lang.
Leonard Cohen, and then Lyle Lovett, I guess, was the last big concert.
Oh, yeah. I didn't see that one. It was a long time ago that they stopped there. Yeah. One thing I really appreciated, both in the book that accompanies this show and in their original document, is I forget how it's phrased in the book, but in the document, it's like, these are guidelines, not restrictions. Yes. And if any people are out there making work that doesn't follow this, please do that. And this is revision and evolution of this is appropriate. And I think also you say that in the book, that this is like an evolving thing, and it doesn't represent history with a capital H. It's some history, and there's a lot that's left out, and there's things that might be a little wrong, or
That's right, and that's why I thought that they were really embracing this kind of form of experimentation. And I loved that line. That's why I also repeated it in the book. But I really took it as the ethos of forming the book. It's called Native Visual Sovereignty. Not restrictions, just guidelines, but then also to think of it as a series of notes. Yeah. Because notes also give you this kind of flexibility and kind of openness in the narrative that you're creating. And so much of, I think, some of the problems that we've had in art history and even history in general is when people try to fix a narrative. And then you realize that, in fact, all the voices and all the stories that are left out. So this is, I would say, more like a compilation.
Yeah. There's also a description of the way that they see the arc of a performance in Indian theater is this flattened chunk of a circle, like
this
flattened half circle, which and you and your partner Raven worked with students at IAI a year or two ago and did a performance here that I saw based on that and on that writing and that sort of arc. And he had, there's things that interrupt in the middle, and you had someone come in and bring food and apologize for being late. And that sort of flat, elongated center where you're not getting this heroic rise and fall and resolution. Things aren't necessarily resolved. They're this sort of evolving and sort of being, and the prolonged time of things contributes to it in a certain way. And I think that's really interesting and unusual. And it's not, as you say, it's not Greek theater.
No, it doesn't follow those rules at all. And actually, it became a real inspiration both at the Hessel Museum and here, which in a way have a similar footprint. So you'll notice when you go through the exhibition that when you come back out again, the actual arc you've traced is that flat half circle.
Oh, nice.
And, for viewers who are really kind of paying attention, especially to the document, you'll see that at the very end, there's a repetition that happens that kind of brings you back to the beginning again.
Nice.
Yeah.
And there's some reference in some of the writing, I don't know if it's yours or someone else's, about like all day dances at pueblos here in northern New Mexico, where it's in that sort of elongated experience that the meaning happens. It's not like you go and you see something short that's like, oh, and that means this. It's in the doing and in the embodiment somehow that the meaning arrives.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said the word embodiment, because what this exhibition is also about is about embodied knowledge, right? And I'm always interested in exhibitions that can change over time.
We have to go, sorry to cut you off. We have to go to break. We'll be right back.
Okay.
We're back. I'm Matthew Chase Daniel talking with Candice Hopkins. We're Coffee and Culture on Talk 1260 and 103.7 KTRC. And you were just talking before I cut you off about embodiment in this exhibition.
Yeah, so what I was sharing is, embodiment is also a form of knowledge. And I think that comes forward in the exhibition in different ways. But what I'm hoping as well is that for viewers who come, and especially people who live here, is that when you come to the exhibition, you might see something different each time. Like some things will shift, change based on the performances that have happened. Erica Lords in particular, where she's revisiting James Luna's famous artifact piece. And, I think people will be rewarded through repeat visits, but also there's so much to experience and hear and kind of see that I don't think it's something that can be easily consumed because there's so many layers to it.
Nice. Wasn't there some writing in there? I'm not going to remember exactly what this is, but it was about embodiment or unembodiment.
Yeah, to be embodied. So this is this beautiful short essay by a poet who's from Driftpile First Nation in Canada, Billy Ray Belcourt. And he's talking about that idea of to be unbodied is also to kind of be aware of our bodies, almost like an assemblage of all the experiences that we've had, positive and negative, right?
Yeah.
And he's kind of like talking about how to navigate the kind of extreme emotion that comes with love. And I just thought that was such a beautiful thing to also to think of, to be embodied as a place of what he considers to be sovereignty as well.
Right. Yeah. And it sort of transcends time and lifespan as well.
Yeah.
It's like this, there's things going on with us before we're born and after we die, and the body is a part of it, but it's not the only container.
No, and it's kind of refusing that linearity of that, but it's also thinking about our experiences as accumulations as well, and to like embrace that idea of accumulation.
Yeah. So we were talking in the beginning about two events that occurred in '69.
Yeah.
The other was the occupation of Alcatraz for close to a year by Native Americans, mostly from South Dakota, from Sioux Nation. So there was a treaty that, and correct me as I get this wrong, a treaty between the Sioux and the U.S. government from the 1880s that any unused or disused, abandoned federal lands would get returned to the Sioux Nation. And so under that treaty, when a bunch of activists, artists, musicians, different people went out to Alcatraz Island, which had been decommissioned as a prison several years before, maybe 63 or something, and said, this is our land and we're going to live here. And they did.
Yeah, they did for 72 months. And that was to test out that law that was designating all federal surplus land, which Alcatraz was officially at that time, to be returned to Lakota Nation. And so in that test, some profound things happened, actually. One, all of a sudden, not only Native rights, but Native lived experiences on reservations were part more mainstream discourse. And this was happening because of Radio Free Alcatraz that John Trudell hosted. It was a nightly radio show, and he had lots of guests. And it was broadcasting from the Rock. But then they were also really shrewd negotiators. But even though the men were often the spokespeople, the people who were preparing the documents were women, like Leneda Warjack. So they were creating proposals for not only uses of Alcatraz Island, but they proposed the first native-run university. It was going to be called Thunderbird University. And it was both a training program, and they thought that it was a model for other native-led universities, not only across the U.S., but all the way across Turtle Island, including south of the border, north of the border, and the kind of what they were able to imagine from this place that had no electricity, no running water, no access to fresh food, right? And they said, ironically, that was very similar, mimicking the conditions of a lot of reservations. So that's why they proposed that this would actually be kind of a perfect reservation. But it was a way for them to talk about Native realities, right? Yeah. And that same year, Vine Deloria Jr. Coined Red Power, and they were also collaborating. This was what I thought was phenomenal too. So they were collaborating with Black Panthers. So they also had free healthcare clinics and free breakfast programs similar to the Black Panthers. They're collaborating with Young Lords. And so this was a kind of moment of not only Native activism, but intersectionality that was taking place. But through that work, through their activism, they were enabled to not just imagine, but try to practice these different worlds that were entirely Native determined, right?
Right. Yeah. And wasn't there another university started under that same treaty? Some UC Davis land, the DQ University.
Yes, I think you're right.
That came out of soon after that.
Yeah. And the thing I was going to mention, though, what they were able to do, leverage from their time at the Rock, is they were able to negotiate with then President Nixon to drop the Federal Indian Relocation Act. So there was a huge proposed federal land grab at the time.
Right.
So they were able to talk about it, to bring it to public consciousness, and actually get him to feel that this actually wasn't the direction they needed to go.
Right. So, and that the Federal Indian Relocation took Natives off of reservations and to relocate them in cities. This started in 1953 or something. And to give them a quote-unquote better life off the poverty of the reservation rather than addressing those problems where they lay.
Yeah.
It was, we're going to give you a better life in the city and just abandon the reservation, and then we have more land.
Yeah. And
for
ironically,
the federal government, but then it was never, the resources in the cities weren't there.
No, they weren't there. But interestingly, the reason that a lot of those students were there in the Bay Area was because of the Relocation Act.
Been moved to San Francisco in the Bay Area.
That's right.
Interesting. Wow. So one thing about Alcatraz that was so effective was the sort of media savvy nature of it. And there was a show here at Site Santa Fe gazillion years ago that included Greenpeace as a artist in it. I don't remember who curated that one, but it was showing documentation of these actions, these dramatic actions that Greenpeace had done, unfurling banners on power plants and all these different things, and putting that in the context of art. That performance is activism, it's environmental activism, but it's also art performance. And that's what gets attention. Yes Men is another outgrowth of that sort of thing. And I think Alcatraz was part of that. Like, it was a very interesting place to claim. It's not like they claimed some land in South Dakota, some BLM land or something. There was like in a big urban center. And 1969 in the Bay Area was the height of hippie, flower power, anti-Vietnam War, Haight-Ashbury, all of that. And so it was very savvy performance art to do that in a way.
It was very savvy performance art, and when I was doing an oral history with the Seneca artist Pete Jemison that you can listen to at MOCNA and online, he said one of the things people don't talk about the occupation is that many of the early members of Indians of all tribes were also practicing and part of Bay Area radical street theater. Mm-hmm. So not only were they savvy, they understood that the rock could be their stage. Things like the Proclamation to the Great White Father that they wrote, that's hilarious if you read that document, was a script. So they were very aware of the media environment, and, they worked in collaboration with journalists to get their message out. So this was pretty highly orchestrated and pretty mature for a group of, younger students from Berkeley, right?
Yeah. And that in this exhibition, we're going to have to go to a break soon, but in this exhibition, there's outgrowths of that movement, things that were birthed at that time. Yeah. And as we were saying, that like 69 in that document by Lloyd Keavenue was seen as this transition time. And so you have like the mirror shields by Chinoopa Hunska Luger at the Dakota Access Pipeline encampment. Mm-hmm. That's also their shields. They're on the front lines dealing with the Army or the National Guard, whoever that was, trying to shut them down. But it's also this piece of art that's a performance that gets media attention and makes a difference through that. So, we're going to go to break. We'll be right back. You're back listening to Coffee and Culture. My name's Matthew Chase Daniel. I'm talking with Candice Hopkins about the exhibition at Site Santa Fe, which is called Indian Theater, Native Performance Art and Self-Determination since 1969. And the show runs through the beginning of September, so come by and see it. And there are also public programs. Erica Lord will be doing a performance called Artifact Revisited, which is a retelling, reworking, re-performance of a James Luna work from 1987. That's on June 6th and August 15th in the galleries. Eric Paul Riege will be doing a performance on August 15th. And on every Saturday through the exhibition from 11 to 2 in the galleries is a piece by Nick Galanin called White Carver, which has a white man carving wood in the sort of tradition of traditional Northwest Coast art, and but the object that he's carving is a sex toy, and so it's sort of there's a lot of humor in that, and critique as well, and I think a lot in Native American art, contemporary art. I see a lot of humor, and it's in visual art, 2D sculpture, performance, and I love humor as a way to draw people in to a conversation and then sort of make them think about what they're laughing about.
Yeah, humor, I think, is often the best form of critique. And I think it's most successful when we can laugh together.
Right. Rather than laughing at each other.
Exactly. Yeah. And we always say, like, in Native communities, isn't that I think a lot of Native folks create so many jokes, and we have such a sense of humor is like, you kind of can't make up all the horrible things that happened in the past, and the only way you can move forward is you kind of have to make some jokes about it, right?
Yeah, and you have to not take yourself too seriously.
Yeah, that's right.
I spent time learning to carve traditional Northwest Coast
work, did.
So I could do that performance. I have the tools. There's something between in cultures. You're from the Pacific Northwest, from the Northwest Coast. A lot of the artists in the show are from the Northwest Coast. Tlingit, Kwakwak,
Kwakwak, yeah.
Kwakwak. And there's a long tradition there that I'm aware of, and in other places too, I'm sure, of performance being songs, dances, performance, so to speak, being part of traditional culture, part of religion, if we want to call that, or ceremony. Some of which is owned, like songs are owned. So not anyone can sing a song that they heard. It's proprietary. And then there's things that are secret that shouldn't be shown out in the larger world. And then there's contemporary performance, which this show is about. And there's obviously contemporary Native theater is coming from contemporary Native people whose culture is a combination of a million different things, including those sort of traditional ceremonial things. And I imagine there's this difficult line for the artists, for you as the curator, what is shown and what isn't shown, what can be used as fodder for these sort of things, what inspires things, what gets changed enough that it's okay or not.
Right. Right. Yeah. There's quite a bit of that negotiating in the exhibition, particularly, as you said, Matthew, around Northwest Coast work. And one, I think, that's really indicative of this is a big installation of copper records by the Kwakiwak artist Sunny Asu. And, Sunny Asu was inspired to make these pieces when he learned of an ethnomusicologist's recordings of the songs of his great-grandfather, the late Chief Billy Asu. And he found those recordings actually on wax cylinder that are at the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec. And he thought there were a number of things that were kind of contradictions to him. Number one, these recordings were made when the potlatch ban was in Canada, which operated for more than 60 years. So it was actually
through the 1950s, right?
It was illegal to sing those songs at that time. But he thought, how is it illegal to sing these songs at this time, and yet an ethnomusicologist can create a recording of them?
They were recorded during the ban.
And so then he was also asking himself this question of, what would our equivalent be of the kind of platinum record? And he thought, obviously, it should be the copper record, but importantly, you can't hear the songs. So you see the records in the exhibition, both the historical ones that Ida Halpern, the ethnomusicologist, recorded, as well as the installation of the copper records that Sunny made. But he also talks about how when he first heard those wax cylinders, he didn't really know his great-grandfather's voice that into hear, when if you're able to hear those songs, they're just he's got this incredible booming voice. And, these aren't just songs for Northwest Coast people. These songs, as part of important ceremonies, were also our governance system. So think about when those songs are silenced, then all of a sudden you also don't have mechanisms for governance in place. That is for electing leadership, for celebrating birth, for mourning the dead. So it's really the heart of culture, and it's much more so than a simple song.
Yeah. So copper is important as the equivalent of the platinum record, because traditionally there are these objects called coppers, which are these sort of shield-shaped, very beautiful hammered copper things originally made out of native found copper deposits of pure copper and hammered. And so very rare and very valuable and given away, broken in potlatch ceremony, things like that. So copper's the thing.
It's the thing, and it was also the traditional bank. So people invested in that over generations, because coppers were passed down, right? Over many generations, and then so you have these kind of generational investments happening in them. And it's funny because those coppers, when they were encountered first by the Indian agents, which kind of lived like spies in our communities in Canada, they were government agents, when they started removing the things from our communities during the potlatch bans, including the regalia and the mass, also the coppers, they were confused as to how to assign values to them, because it was so confounding to them that these were the most valuable items, but that doesn't translate exactly into a monetary dollar value. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bo Dick is one of the artists in the show, who did great work. I first saw his work in the mid 80s, I guess, and was just inspired and amazed at his sort of facility for drama in the work.
Yeah.
You know, masked with blood dripping on them, and just very exquisitely beautiful, and also just very evocative of different things. And maybe this is related to Coppers. He's also from that same area, and has, I think, in the show that you curated, the documenta, and then also maybe in a gallery show, made these beautiful masks that are traditional. They're very mostly painted white, and then destroyed at a certain point and burnt.
That's right.
And similar to this sort of destroying of a copper or something as a display of power and wealth and sort of abundance in sort of the way I understand it. But I don't know.
So those white masks you're talking about are the Atlakim, or they're called the Forest Mask series, and it's based on a story of a little boy who kind of travels between worlds, and he was ostracized and actually abused by his father, so he started taking solace in the forest, and there he met all these supernatural creatures, and they were giving him and showing him the kind of different powers that he could embody himself. But those masks in particular, there are about 40 of them, and each of them has a song and story associated with them. They're meant to be danced 4 times. This doesn't mean 4 years, but 4 times as part of the ceremony, which is a seasonal one. It's not hosted all the time. And then at the end of their life cycle, because masks are living, they are ceremonially burned. But they're burned because that's what enables them to live. Because then all of a sudden there's the obligation for not only Bo, but his apprentices to carve them again. And when you're carving them, then you gain this embodied knowledge where you learn the song and the story associated with each of them. And one of the things that Bo shared was that, there's a couple of those masks that he kind of invented again because the stories and the songs were lost. But Bo was always doing that. He was always inventing with the tradition.
Yeah. We have to go to another break. Back listening to Coffee and Culture. You can listen to podcasts of the conversations I have with different people about interesting things, including this one. Look on your whatever podcast platform you like for Coffee and Culture with Matthew Chase Daniel, or you can look on my website, which is chasedaniel.com, and there's a podcast thing on there. So much to talk about, and so many interesting things. So when you're not curating shows, you're the director of Forge Project in upstate New York, near where I grew up. And Forge is native-run organization, arts and convenings, and recently, like, transitioning from one big funder to being a nonprofit with many funders and sort of launching its way into independence, which must be exciting and daunting both as the director of that to make that happen.
It was our own form of self-determination, and it was also for the co-founder, whose name is Becky Gotchman. She right from the beginning knew that for this needed to be a native-led organization, and with that evolution, the best way to enable that was, and I think that she was pretty inspired by, let's say, what we were talking about before, the potlatch ethos, is, you can really set something in motion by giving away your wealth. And so that meant that all of we sit on just under 40 acres in the Mahicanatuck River Valley, which is traditionally and customarily Mohican land. But Matthews, you know well because you're from that area, that whole area of the Mahikanatuk Valley, and Mahikanatuk is the Mohican word for what is a bit of a misnomer, the Hudson River, because that part...
That would be Henry Hudson. Right?
Yeah. Well, not just Henry Hudson.
A latecomer to the neighborhood.
He was a latecomer, but also it's a misnomer because it's not exactly a river, and it's not exactly a river at that point. It's actually an estuary.
It's tidal all the way up.
It's tidal all the way up to Troy, New York, so it actually does, the waters do flow both ways there, and it's just indicative of the fact that, our place names in Indigenous languages weren't just names. They shared knowledge about that place. And so at Forge, which is a Native-run nonprofit organization, we try to support the work of Native leaders in many different fields. So thinking of art actually as a part of culture, in that what we try to tell people is, like, we're not a museum. And we're not a museum for many different reasons, because we didn't want to inherit that model, that when you go back in time, that model was based on, powerful people creating cabinets of curiosity that they could display to others. So people would imagine what those other worlds were and create a whole host of stereotypes as they were doing it. But instead, to think about, what does it mean? What does Indigenous placemaking mean in a place where people have been displaced? So Mohicans were starting to be displaced all the way in the 1700s. What does it mean for people to return to their homelands? What does Indigenous placemaking, how can we enact it in this context? And so one of the first things that we did as well is we started to work with knowledge keepers of the land, inviting back people to seize the land, creating a health ecosystem, and thinking of that land and its own agency also as part of our legacy of our work.
Yeah, dealing with ticks.
Yeah, well, and when you create a kind of diverse ecosystem, you have a lot less ticks, because you have things like possums come and visit more often who eat 45,000 ticks a year.
That's
off
good.
Their bodies. So they're amazing tick hunters.
Yeah. And they get a bum rat possum. People generally don't love those.
No, they're pretty
odd
special
little creatures.
creatures.
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up a few miles from there, but there were no possums when I was a kid. I spent a lot of time in the forest. There were also no deer ticks when I was a kid there.
Right.
It was before all of that. And I just spent time in the meadows and the forests and in the leaves. And it was a magical place to be a kid.
Yeah. Now, the ticks carry Lyme disease, so that's why everyone's so remarkably careful. And part of that also is because, Mohicans, like a lot of other Native folks, they were actively tending to the land, including cultural burns and things like that. Like,
right.
All that land, the reason the Hudson River Valley became was so picturesque to people like Thomas Cole and Frederick Church was because it had been tended for thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
And then they just created these pictures which were all about the settler desire and the settler imaginary, right?
Right.
So.
Right. Which another artist in the exhibition here at site is Kent Monkman, who is sort of riffing on those paintings with different content.
Yeah.
Which if you walked by it and glanced at it, you wouldn't even notice. And when you look at it, and again, lots of humor, but lots of critique.
Yeah, we also like to infiltrate into the settler imaginary too. So that's one form of infiltration. And speaking of another form of infiltration is the Collective New Red Order, who are there in the project space at site with, I think, their most ambitious installation yet. But there's also ads on the outside of the building, and I really encourage people to look at that. And what they were sharing with us today is that it's kitty corner to the Nature Conservancy, which has a lot of land. And, there's opportunities to give your land back, serious opportunities, and they're ones who will help facilitate that.
Right. And they have an 800 number, I believe, as part of the show that you can call. And
and that number, if any guests want to call now, it's 1-888-NEW-RED-1, and you too can become an accomplice and part of the Red Order.
Yeah. And the New Red Order, their name is a riff on the New Order of Red Men.
That's right.
Which was like a Southern white men dressing up like natives, doing their totally non-native thing.
Yeah, it was,
this is early 20th century?
They said that and it continues today. It's still an active fraternity today. and past presidents have been a part of it. There's not naming names on this podcast, but you can look into the history yourself. But they think of, because that was a movement all about appropriation too. So why can't we counter appropriate, right?
Yeah.
And think of that as its own. Think of the power that comes with that kind of form of infiltration. But New Red Order has also been commissioned to create an ad, and it'll greet you at the Alcatraz airport. It'll be throughout Santa Fe. It'll also be on TV at home.
Nice. Wow. So much going on. There's a book launch and readings from the book. The book is called Native Visual Sovereignty, A Reader on Art and Performance. It's 500 and some pages long, I think.
560.
Yeah. So it's a lot. I picked it up, came here to the lobby yesterday and sat down to read it. And I skimmed at least half of it and read some of it. But it's dense and beautiful and a lot of writing and images and worth looking at. So that event is in the middle of August, I believe.
During Indian Market.
Yeah, August 15th, maybe.
August 15th.
And you can find out more about all of this and other things that are going on as part of the show by going to Site Santa Fe's website. So if you just Google Site Santa Fe, SITE, there's a great website with lots of information about this show and other things.
As well as at the Museum of Contemporary Native Art, which has a really important component of the exhibition, some of the archival material, Chinoopahanska Luger's Mirror Shield projects, Matthew, which you mentioned before. They're also facilitating a workshop Mirror Shield projects, as well as Walter Scott, who, when we were talking about kind of alter egos before, and fictional identities, has an amazing fictional identity called Wendy, who's full of all kinds of anxiety, and you get to kind of see how she negotiates the kind of world art school. So I highly encourage people to also go to Mokna, where you kind of get a different layer of the exhibition.
Great. And Mokna's downtown, just off the plaza in an old post office, now a museum, across from the cathedral. Definitely worth going there. Well, I have a note here. We're almost out of time, but it says emotional, not intellectual. I think that's from the original document. Yeah. And I just, I think that's important. That gets back to sort of this flattened circle and elongated time and durational performance, which we're seeing with Erica Lord or Eric Paul Riege, the James Luna piece that Erica's reperforming, and other pieces of his have to do with that. Rebecca Belmore. It hits us emotionally, but there also is sort of this intellectual. It's both emotional and intellectual. And the process of curating and putting together a book is intellectual too. So I love sort of prioritizing the emotional in the experience for us as experiencing the show. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for the conversation, Matt.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure.